What's up, everyone? My name is Alan, founder and consultant at For Now Marketing, and welcome to Liquid for Technical Marketers. Today, we're going to talk about the date variable and the ISO 8601. Whoa, that's a lot of letters and numbers, but don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds. Let's get started. So, what is a date variable? In Liquid, there's no specific data type for date, and date variables are technically a string because the values are surrounded by quotes. However, Braze does recognize date as a separate data type, and Braze actually calls it time. But for this video, whenever we mention the data type date, this date can include both date and time. So we'll use date and time interchangeably. And in Braze, date is a special type of data type, even though it is technically a string that has plenty of its own use cases, and the date variable gets its own set of rules and liquid filters. Because there are so many use cases, learning about the liquid use cases for the date variable is that much more valuable. But first, let's talk about the date format we should use when working with date variables. So, what is ISO 8601? ISO 8601 is the weird set of letters and numbers that we talked about in the beginning of the video. However, it's actually quite simple, and it is a date format. First, ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. I do know that recognize that the letters are kind of swapped. And I'm sure we've all seen the ISO 8601 date format at some point in our lives. It's simply the YYYY-MM-DD, year, month, date, capital T for time, and then HH:MM:SS, hours, minutes, seconds, and TZD, which stands for time zone designator. So this is the full standard format for ISO 8601. And here's an example of what that might look like using a real date stamp. And this date stamp would translate to something more friendly like this, which, by the way, is definitely possible in Liquid, and we will go over that in the next video. And what's the point of ISO 8601 and why should we use it? The answer is really in the name. It's an international organization for standardization, meaning that this date format, ISO 8601, allows users all over the world to stay consistent with their date variable format. We know that in the US, we tend to write our dates in month, date, year order. So this looks like August 9th for me. But in Europe, they tend to write their dates in date, month, year order. So to me, this looks like September 8th, 2024. But to someone in Europe, this might look like August 9th, 2024. See, I'm already getting confused. However, by following ISO 8601 format, we can stay universally consistent by keeping our date format YYYY-MM-DD. I would say universally, this format right here is pretty clear to everyone that this is 2024, August 9th. So whenever you're assigning variables with a date value, make sure to use the ISO 8601 format. And it is actually also a requirement for Braze to be in ISO 8601 format when working with date, data type, and variables. So let's jump into the Braze dashboard and create a date variable together. But before we do that, we do want to go over two quick things. One, ISO 8601 uses 24-hour clock, so make sure you brush up on that. And two, let's talk about the time zone designator. And the time zone designator for me personally is minus 0700, which is the Los Angeles time zone designator. I did a quick Google search for it, and it says that I am in Pacific Daylight Time. And I was able to get this number right here where it says GMT -7. That's where I was able to figure out that my time zone designator is minus 0700. So jumping into Braze, I'm going to assign a variable called liquid for technical marketers start date and set it equal to today's date stamp. So 2024-08-15, August 15th. T for capital time, and my time on my MacBook is currently 16:39, and we will use 00 for seconds. Lastly, the time zone designator that we just went over for Los Angeles is minus 07:00. And if we go ahead and render this variable, we will just get exactly what's shown here. It is a string after all. But once again, date variables do have special liquid filters where we can use to manipulate the date format and render it in a much more user-friendly way, and even do date calculations, which we will go over in the future. Before we wrap up this video, let's go over what exactly does that minus 0700 mean. And that minus 0700 was the time zone designator for Los Angeles Pacific Daylight Time. However, just in general, that number minus 0700 is the difference between the local time, for me, Los Angeles, and the Coordinated Universal Time, UTC. Once again, the letters are swapped for some reason. And that difference between the local time and the Coordinated Universal Time is called the UTC offset. And real quick, two notes about UTC. UTC itself is not a time zone, but UTC does follow the same time as the Greenwich Mean Time, GMT, which is based in London. So going back to the UTC offset, this is expressed as plus or minus HH colon MM, where HH is the number of hours and MM is the number of minutes away from the UTC. And fun fact, there are certain time zones where there are only 30 minutes away from the nearby time zones. So I thought that was very interesting. So the full time zone designator is written as the sign plus or minus, followed by the UTC offset, the difference between the local time and UTC. Here are some key time zones to take a look around the world. Just looking at some US timelines for me personally. So Hawaii, Honolulu is minus 10:00 from UTC. And then we have Alaska, -9, followed by the four major US time zones: Pacific, Mountain, Central, and Eastern. And by the way, these are standard time zones. So we are currently in daylight savings time, which is why we saw -7 for Los Angeles earlier. When we're not doing daylight savings time, Los Angeles is in -8. And then a few other notable time zones around the world that are a little bit more ahead of the US time zone. And here's an even cooler world map that shows a nice visual of the time zone. So UTC right here is set at 12:00. And then you can see that if you are behind the UTC, if the time zone is behind UTC, we go into the minus zones, with Los Angeles being right here, New York being right here. And once again, we are, it says -8 because this map does not include daylight savings time. And if you are ahead of UTC, you are in the plus time zones, where the number on top represents how many hours ahead of UTC that time zone is. That's it for today. Thank you for watching and see you next time.